It is my immense pleasure to welcome each and everyone present here today for the 22nd annual 7th International Science Fiction Virtual Conference, April 2023, organized by the Indian Association for Science Fiction Studies. I am Anugraha, final year English student from Sri Sharada College, Salem, and I am honored to welcome the gathering for the first session today. Today's panel discussion is titled as My Experiments with Science Fiction Writings. We have eminent research supervisors as participants of today's discussion. It is my privilege to welcome Professor C.P. Ravichandra, moderator of the session, renowned poet, mountaineer, founder of the School of Adventure, retired professor, and head of the PG Department of English, University of Mysore, recently in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to take over the session.
Good morning, everybody. This is Ravi Chandra. I was asked to moderate on issues related to research in science fiction studies. The reason why this subject was thought of very clearly indicates the enormous amount of problems that confront a young researcher who attempts to treat this rather rarefied area of studies in India. One would have thought in these days of borderless studies, science fiction studies would register a fairly warm climate, but that doesn't seem to be the case in question. What we have today are 8 scholars from various colleges and universities, from both sciences and humanities, addressing you, expressing their misgivings, as well as offering their plausible, possible solutions. They are Dr. Anbarasi, the principal of Government College, Salem District, Tamil Nadu; Amitabha Bhattacharjee, a professor of from Sikkim University, Sikkim State; and Shreya Bhattacharjee, a professor of English from the Center for English Language, Central University of Jharkhand; Dr. Dr.Srinarahari from the PG Department of English, GLA University, Mathura; Dr. G. Nataraju, Chair, Department of English, Karnataka State Open University, Mysore; Dr. K.S. Purushottaman, former Principal, Government Arts College, Krishnagiri, Tamil Nadu; Dr. Ratnakar Bhelkar, former Head and Professor, Department of English, Dhanvate National College, Nagpur, Maharashtra; Dr. Rukmini Krishna, Associate Professor, Department of English, VIT University, Vellore; and Dr. Sonali Santosh Kadam, Associate Professor, Department of Botany, R.P. Gogte and R.V. Joglekar College, Ratnagiri, Maharashtra. Between the 8 of them, they will discuss a whole range of issues that confronts a young scholar today who pursues or who intends to pursue research in science fiction. Now, as a preamble, I would like to raise some points which may be pondered upon by all of you. Is science fiction a study of conflict? Now, when we look at science fiction as a study of conflict, we are crossing the borders between the human and the non-human. We are looking at both terrestrial and extraterrestrial environments. We are concerned with Earth as well as outer space. We are trying to look into certain concerns that are both planetary and intergalactic in nature. Now, what is the validity of such research on science fiction? What is the quotient of longevity of the theme or subject of one's research? Is the fundamental question that we have to raise. Because by definition, science fiction deals with certain topics and certain ambiances that are current, that are determined by the state of science today, which changes very fast. So is all our research in science fiction, therefore, bound by a certain span of time? Are all speculative fiction research bedeviled by the problem of limited history, therefore? What is central to research in science fiction then? Does a study of speculative fiction demand a new philosophical center, which is very different from the kind of philosophical centers that we are used to look at in other areas of literary studies? Does it produce a new aesthetic then? Like postmodernism itself did produce a new aesthetic. Does the study of science fiction studies, does research in science fiction produce a new aesthetic? What is the kind of value systems that evolve out of this research? Will such value systems be very different from what we are exposed to, what we are familiar with today? Then, the follow-up question is, does science fiction challenge an established value system? If it does, what would be its status? Would it be tolerated? Would it be condoned? Would it be seen as contributive? Or would it be seen as something that is destructive and disruptive? Or is it essentially all of these, and therefore far more valid? Now, how do we look at this entire study of science fiction? How do we historicize this? Does science fiction straddle many time zones, like most literatures do? Or is it concerned merely with the present and the future? How do you read galactic time then? Is there a galactic time that is very different from the human time? The reason why this question is asked is because of the idea of speed that comes into play. Once we start talking about galactic experiences, we necessarily have to contend with a certain notion of speed that we are as yet unaware of. In other words, is travel fundamental to science fiction? Now, as soon as we talk about travel, we talk about both time and space. Now, the two ordering principles of human life. What then is order in science fiction? Is it human or otherwise? What is the language of science fiction, therefore? How does science fiction use language to contend with these strange and formidably novel experiences? Is there an urgent need to be linguistically innovative in evolving an aesthetic at variance with the 20th century concepts? What political order will emerge because of that? And what new hierarchies does mankind contend with? What is then the politics of future? Is there a new economy in operation already, which funds your travel through space, which orients new colonies of tomorrow, which looks at different kinds of fuel system to drive the engines of the future? Will the state become redundant? With ultra merchandise in the offing, can the modern state handle it? Do we then have to jettison what we call the state today in order to be tomorrow's citizens? This brings us round to the question of the very foundation of what we call real. What is real? How do the hyperreal and the real get framed in this context? In the face of confrontational ideas of an ever-expanding universe and limit knowledge, what kind of investigative equipment should the researcher and the examiner possess? Is it enough to have a very good command over language? What are the knowledge bases into which the scholar dwell? So, will his research necessarily be across disciplines? Fundamental to this is also the question of who the valuer of the future thesis would be. Do we have enough expertise in our universities or beyond who can be recognized and then roped in to value the thesis of a modern scholar? Do we have a bank of speculative studies experts in India? If not, is there an urgent need to evolve and maintain one? These are very fundamental yet critical questions that need to be answered. So what, in fact, is the support system that we can talk about to support a good research in speculative studies, in science fiction studies? Are there dedicated sections in our libraries on science fiction? I very much doubt. There may be an exceptional library in some metropolis or the other, but how many? Even if there are libraries, how many shelves do these libraries contain dedicated to science? Is it multidisciplinary? Are humanities, social sciences, and science willing to share resources at this point? Are we, as academicians, willing to get out of our little wells of knowledge? Are universities intelligent enough today to allow cross-border research routinely? And then the nitty-gritties. Who finances these studies? The obvious answer would be University Grants Commission. But is that enough? Is it capable of funding new research, which may require establishing different kinds of laboratories, different kinds of field work, which may involve a larger canvas and therefore a larger economic networking? Who finances these studies? And then who supervises? Where will the research be registered? Will it be registered in an English department as it's being done now, or will it be registered in a physics department? Can it be registered in a botany department? Or will there be a committee of co-guides who will probably come under the dean of faculty? Or do we have to develop an entirely different system of research coordinates? In conclusion, the scholars, all worthy academicians, may address over 2 sessions to follow all or some of the above concerns, offer new insights and modalities to help research in sci-fi in India to grow along healthy contours. I wish the sessions well and proper fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I invite our first panelist, Dr. Anbarasi V, Principal, Government Arts and Science College, Dharmapuri District, to add her valuable ideas to the discussion.
My humble salutation to this August forum. I am Dr. V. Antarasi, Principal, Government Arts and Science College, Makireddy. I have been working as a research supervisor in English literature. So far, 13 of my doctoral candidates have got through. 4 of them have been right now doing their research under my guidance. I categorize the research issues that are faced both by me and then my research scholars under 3 categories. The first one is the research scholars themselves. Most of them hail from second grade urban area and they happen to be the first of its own kind from their family too. Non inadequate exposure with the research field and inaccurate language naturally intimidate them a lot. So it takes time for them to muster courage and confidence to be a full-fledged research scholar. Research scholars can be categorized under two sectors, namely part-time and full-time. Part-time research scholars naturally are experienced hands and they do have complete mastery over the language. They're endowed with divergent thinking ability and a sound research acumen. Despite having these many positive qualities, their commitment towards their personal and professional sectors naturally make them stay not focused with their research and they really find it very difficult to cope with the research expectations both formally and then academically. When it comes to the full-time scholars, almost all of them are freshers, so naturally they are inexperienced, but they do stay focused and they take all possible efforts by way of adhering to the system and ultimately they evolve. But the greatest drawback with them is that they are not endowed with sound analytical acumen and they are not very sharp in identifying the issues that are to be located in the research field. They do need thorough guidance at every level, but they sustain their interest in the course, which ultimately help them to evolve into a successful researcher. Now, the second category is the research work as it is. The researchers mostly confine their research scope with the undertaken texts. A lot of preliminary reading on the writer and his or her works is hardly accomplished by them. Getting familiarized with the available secondary sources will certainly strengthen their research scope. With the undertaken texts, a lot of preliminary reading on the writer and his or her works is hardly accomplished by them. Getting familiarized with the available secondary sources will certainly strengthen their research scope. This familiarization will certainly make them be thorough with the concepts and enable them to explore into the multidimensional and various facets of the single text that is taken up for the study. Such candidates could very clearly draw their research plan and easily identify the relevant theories that will lead to reasonable, logical, and rational analysis. The third biggest issue that is faced by every researcher is the publication criteria to be fulfilled with. This has become highly mandatory nowadays. But despite the meticulous planning and clear drafting, getting their articles published in a Scopus indexed journal or a genuine UGC CAR listed journal is really very, very unaccomplishable. This has become a nightmare because it costs not only much of their time, mind, and energy, but also if it is a paid journal, their money also. So we have to clearly draft the research requirements in such a way that even people hailing from the poorest background will be able to meet out the expenditure that are expected of in conducting a research. These are some of the vital issues that are faced by my literary scholars. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I welcome Dr. Amitabha Bhattacharjee, Sikkim University, for the session.
Hello, friends. Hello, everybody. I'm going to speak on science fiction, science through fiction. The idea is to attempt to explain concepts of sciences through the use of fiction for easy understanding. I am myself Amitabh Bhattacharya. I am an associate professor in the Department of Physics in Sikkim University. And this is a joint presentation by me and with Dr. Shreya Bhattacharya, who is a professor in the Department of English Studies, Central University of Jharkhand in Ranchi. Now let us look at the normal problems in teaching physics. The challenges involved in teaching physics are legion, there are plenty. So my goal here, let me try to provoke a few things. Let's look at these two equations. If they look complicated to you, believe me, they are very simple equations as far as physics is concerned. How does one explain such a mathematical equation? Okay, I can explain it by saying that this thing is equal to this into this plus this minus that. That is just translating the equation into words. Does that help? I am not sure. Another thing is one can create a situation and try to explain that equation through that situation. So to do that, if I just explain the equation in words, that is what most popular science books do. And I'm not sure that that works. Another is to create a situation, then exaggerate the problem so that it is visible very obviously, then tell how this whole understanding came up from, and in the process you use all kinds of fantasy to be able to keep the attention of the reader. The first person to write in this way was Johannes Kepler of the planetary orbits fame. He wrote a book, Somnium, which is in the modern context it would be called a novella. He wrote it in Latin, and it was published posthumously 4 years after his death by his son. And many scholars consider it to be the first book of science fiction. And here we see two pictures of Kepler. The left one is a Hungarian stamp, the right one is an East Germany stamp. And on the right is the front page of the book as it was published for the first time. So, and he has used dreams to transport a man to the moon. Of course, there were no spacecraft, so he had to use a dream. And from while he is on the moon, this person watches the movement of stars. And comparing it with what he remembers on Earth, he understands how the planets move. That is the first attempt to explain science using fiction. Another person who has done a terrific job in this, I considered, is George Gamow, who wrote his books in a magazine called Discover, and then that came out as a collection of short stories. These stories, he called them science fantasies, and he did not like them to be called science fiction. So his series again works through dreams of Mr. Tompkins. Mr. C.G.H. Tompkins, to be more specific, he is a small, mild mannered clerk of a big city bank. And the C, G, and H are interesting initials because C is the speed of light, G is the gravitational constant, and H is the Planck's constant. And in later books, the C has been expanded to Cyril, but the G and H are not known. In recent times, when some of the ideas in the books became, well, unrelated or maybe even wrong, the books were rewritten by Russell Stannard, and here is the front page of the book. In all these books, in all these stories, Mr. Tompkins goes to attend a lecture and he falls asleep in the middle of the lecture. In those During his sleep, he dreams that he is in a place where the same effects that are being explained as very small effects become highly exaggerated. Speed of light comes down to 10 miles an hour. Planck's constant, which has a decimal and 34 zeros after that, becomes 1, and things like that. And so he understands special relativity, quantum mechanics, and many more things. In India, at least in Bengali, the most famous science fiction series is by the well-known film director Satyajit Ray, who wrote the Professor Shonku series. And Professor Shonku disappears mysteriously, and after that, his diaries are found. And through the diaries, we come to know that he has worked on many scientific problems, and he has always worked from his in his homemade laboratory in Giridih, which is now in Jharkhand. One of his books, one of the stories, Professor Shonku O El Dorado, was made into a movie in 2019. And here you see on top a commemorative stamp of Satyajit Ray, which came out in 1994, and you see the Pathir Panchali next to it. On the left hand side is the front page of the movie. It's a poster of the movie Professor Shonku El Dorado, and below is a sketch. You see Professor Shonku holding his pet Newton with his manservant Prahlad at the back. He is flanked by his two friends, Abhinash Babu, who is the great skeptic, and Nokur Babu on the in white, who is the typical clairvoyant. Another series, more interesting to me but less well known, is the Ghanada series by Pramendra Mitra. Ghanada, or more specifically Mr. Ghanashyam Das, he stays in a small mess body, which is a what now would be called a paying guest house. It's a house with many rooms. People stay there and they eat at a common eating facility. So this is a small mess body like that in Banamali Nashkal Lane. People used to come on Mondays, work till Saturday, and go back home on Saturday evening. So this is a mess body in North Calcutta where he regales Shibu, Shishir, Gaur, and Sudhir, which is adventures all over the world and also beyond the world, like in Mars and other planets. And interestingly, each story tells the reader of a very new concept in sciences. In my own humble way, I have also tried to write stories in this way, only two so far. First one was King Topicals and the Mythical Origin of Modern Physics, which came out in January 2015 in the Journal of Advanced Studies, in which I have attempted to explain classical mechanics, that the normal things that we see around us, quantum mechanics, basically the physics of very small objects, and relativity, the concept of the effects of very fast moving objects. And just 1.5 years back, I wrote Through the Eyes of Queen Brownia, Stories to Learn Physics. Here, I have attempted to explain Brownian motion of molecules and interference of light. That's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your resourceful ideas. Now we have Dr. Kasturi Sinhare, PG Department of English, GLA University, Mathura, Uttar Pradesh, India. I now invite her for the session.
A very warm welcome to all my audience here today. It is an opportunity to address the International Conference on Science Fiction Studies. We are going to discuss certain areas of research from both the supervisor's point of view as well as the research scholar's point of view in this presentation. So let us begin. Towards a better research scenario of science fiction in India, this presentation mainly focuses on how we are going to approach science fiction from the research perspective, both from the supervisor as well as the researcher's point of view. To begin with, science fiction is often denigrated as unliterary, but at its best is an extremely powerful engagement with real, often troubling issues from theology to ecology and beyond. This sentence is the introductory sentence to the course offered by Dr. John Leonard, University of Cambridge, UK. The name of the course is 5 Great Works of Science Fiction. There are two ways of attending the course. One is online, one is on site. In both the cases, you have to make a payment of 160 UK pounds, and not everybody is eligible. You have to go through a screening process also. So, a researcher who would like to enroll for this course, this expensive course, still has to undergo a lot of screening to get a standard platform to discuss science fiction. Research scope in science fiction. The relation between science fiction and technological advancements. How does science fiction influence technological developments, and how do, let's say, technological advancements shape the themes and narratives of science fiction? These things we can cover in the research questions. The representation of gender and race in science fiction. We all know that science fiction has a long history of exploring and pushing the boundaries of social norms and values. However, it has also been criticized for perpetuating harmful stereotypes and marginalizing certain groups. This area of research could also examine how science fiction can challenge or, let's say, reinforce existing power structures, social hierarchies, etc. The third is the role of science fiction in shaping public perceptions of science. Science fiction often portrays scientific concepts and theories in imaginative and accessible ways, but it can also oversimplify or misrepresent scientific concepts. This area of research could explore how science fiction can be utilized, can be used to promote scientific literacy and understanding. The fourth point is the intersection of science fiction and environmentalism. Science fiction has increasingly explored themes related to environmental degradation, climate change, and sustainability. This area of research could examine how science fiction can raise awareness and inspire action on environmental issues. The next point here today is the impact of globalization on science fiction. As science fiction continues to become a global genre, spreading its wings everywhere, touching all the aspects of the global culture in the global village, with writers and readers from diverse cultural backgrounds, this area of research could explore how the entire concept of globalization is shaping the themes and narratives and even the audiences of science fiction. Now, here I'm going to talk about the issues faced by the researchers. Inability of higher academia to accept science fiction as a major literary genre, just like we discussed what John Leonard has already talked about. The second is lack of research materials in online and on-site databases. Although there are numerous blogs you will find, but we cannot really consider blogs as authentic research sources. There are science fiction, fan fiction blogs where science fiction is rewritten over the years, is recreated, transcreated. All of these things keep on happening, but if we discuss the research from the research perspective, we will not find standard materials. Only very few writers have been, especially in India, the writers have been researched. Dearth of meets and conferences, as we know that Indian Science Fiction Association Bangalore is the only registered association which is acting towards the goal of bringing science fiction into the mainstream academia, because there is apparently an hierarchy that science fiction is not literary. Again, I am reiterating the previous points. No government fellowship or sponsorship to pursue field projects and multidisciplinary research or science fiction. We get grants for women's studies, we get grants for cultural studies, but we will not be fetching a good grant for science fiction studies. So that thing is something that demotivates a researcher to pursue the field. Gendered language for addressing the latest AI characters in science fiction. So this is something which is related to the most modern novels containing the AI question, the artificial intelligence in the form of humanoid robots taking place, especially if you consider Asimov, you consider Kazuo Ishiguro, you consider the movies that are created on the writers who have written about AI characters. Everywhere we find that the AI is addressed in a gendered language, that it is either he or a she. The pronouns that are being used in the novels gives us a bias, a kind of bias to look at them. This thing is a wonderful area where research can be pursued, but equally it is difficult for a researcher to keep themselves unbiased while dealing with certain characters present in the literary works. So, a proper framework should be developed by the gender studies researchers to describe the AI characters, to talk about the AI characters. This is something what the science fiction scenario is in Indian academia. If you take up the UGC undergraduate model, you will find that it is the seventh paper in the discipline centric elective, and it is clubbed with detective literature. We have these three or four things: the Women in White, the Hound of Baskervilles, the Big Sleep, and Inspector Getty Goes by Train. And the suggested topics are all related to crime, nothing related to science fiction. Only there is a portion of ethics which has been, we can talk about bioethics and other domains, the three laws of robotics, those we can talk about, but proper science fiction is not included at all in the UGC model for the undergraduate course. Here is the master degree model of the UGC English Honours course. We have a very good collection, although Frankenstein, we have Lost World, we have works of H.G. Wells. But see, the highlighted things is there has not been a particular mention of a work. Only works by Poe, works by Jules Verne, works by John Wyndham or J.G. Ballard, Brian Aldiss, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov. They are all set as if we can just put any of the authors over there. So, unlike the other course materials, for example, the core courses, British literature, Indian classical literature, European classical literature, they are core courses, and the topics, poems, everything is selected and again updated after 3-4 years. But in science fiction, the course that has been updated in the website of UGC, you will have just phrases like works by Poe, works by Jules Verne. So why not mention that we can take Jules Verne Journey to the Center of the Earth, or Isaac Asimov's Reason, Ray Bradbury's There Will Come Soft Rains, Arthur C. Clarke's The Sentinel. All of these things needs to be put over there. Conan Doyle's, there are lots and lots of other stories, The Horror of the Heights, The Leather Funnel, The Terror of Blue John Gap. Why are we not mentioning those in the syllabus itself? Of course, we have Le Guin, we have Carl Sagan, we have Olaf Stapleton, but the sheer negligency is quite visible in the syllabus. Here is something I would like to discuss, that is, MOOCs are not available, NPTEL courses are not available, Swayamprabha courses are not available on science fiction, seminars, conferences, workshops not available in India other than what the Indian Association for Science Fiction Studies conducts every year. FDPs are missing, the faculty is not educated enough to appreciate the field of science fiction. Even the most popular certification website, Coursera, where many universities offer courses online, they also do not have any specific courses related to science fiction. And most importantly, there is no women writers apart from Mary Shelley included in the course. We have Joanna Russ, Margaret Atwood, Le Guin, Rokia Begum, N.K. Jemisin, only to name a few. So these writers need to be appreciated within the domain of science fiction right from the UG model. So I think this is something we can think of and plan together as a part of this very prestigious organization. This is a ray of hope in Indian academia. Some departments of our country, where we have so many institutions and departments: Indraprasth University, Delhi, Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology, Trivandrum, School of Humanities and Social Sciences, National Institute of Science Education and Research, Bhubaneswar, and Department of English, University of Mumbai. Only these a few universities and departments have full-fledgedly launched science fiction as a paper in their curriculum. But again, it is an elective, it is not a core course. Of course, let us start with baby steps and we'll move forward. Finally, I want to discuss the targets that we must set for ourselves as science fiction enthusiasts, science fiction researchers, supervisors in this decade. that is to establish an independent department of science fiction studies in the universities, launch affordable certificate courses where the researcher does not have to spend lots and lots of money to gather knowledge, organize faculty development programs where we will be discussing science fiction as a major literary genre, discuss Indian science fiction authors like Satyajit Ray, Jayant Narlikar, Premendra Mittal, Suparna Banerjee, Priya Saukai Chabria, Anish Deb, Sujatha, etc. We must include the Indian academia within the discourse of science fiction. And here are I'm noting down I'm noting down six sustainable development goals forwarded by the UNESCO. We can encourage our scholars, our researchers to look into the science fiction that has been already written and is in the trend that is being set right now. Look into them from these perspectives so that we can uplift the standard of science fiction research in our country, because India is a signatory in that conference for the sustainable development goals. If we encourage science fiction in this line, or if we encourage reading of science fiction, research on science fiction, adhering to the sustainable development goals, then I am sure that the higher academia will be realizing the impact of these science fiction works. So, here I would like to put forward my thanks to all my audience today. I am very happy to share all these views with you, and I hope if you have any suggestions and questions, you will surely share with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now it's time for Dr. G. Nataraju, Department of English, Karnataka State Open University, Mysore, Karnataka, India, to add his thoughts to the session.
Hello everybody, this is Dr. Nataraju from Karnataka State Open University, and I'm the chairman of Department of English. I'm also one of the panelists of this 2 days international conference on science fiction. As we all aware of, science fiction is a recent genre. It's a very popularized genre. Especially when we talk about Canadian science fiction, because science fictions are emerged in Canadian literature. Then we have to think about who are the writers, the novelists who have popularized this science fiction genre. Namely, there are three prominent Canadian authors of science fiction: Phyllis Gottlieb, Margaret Atwood, Ian Martel. Further, there is an important dictum, there is a philosophy which connects with the science fiction. And we all are aware of S.T. Coleridge as a very brilliant romantic poet. This notion called Coleridgean dictum is a very popularized term. For what? For willing suspension of disbelief. As a reader, we all have this rationale, thinking rationally about any concept in the age of technology and science in the 21st century literature. Then, the willing suspension of disbelief leads to incredulity. Credulity means that we simply believe. Incredulity, that means that we always have a question, we don't easily believe things. So, the core question is, can we believe science fiction? Is it real? What's happening around the world? Which captures in literature? And further, I think we all have to ponder about it. Credulity as foundation to exploring beyond the known. I repeat, credulity as foundation to exploring beyond the known. And man as the ancient mariner, constantly pushing the border of his credulity and his experience. So even an ancient mariner become very rationally. So every writer, every speaker, and even every reader should develop this concept called what is called as incredulity. That means we always have the question mark, can this really happen? Does it really happen? So this science fiction, the core question of science fiction today that we all are going to interrogate the term so-called the science fiction. I must ask you, what is science fiction? The science fiction is a genre concerned with future technological innovations, environment, space travel, and life on galactic life. Science fiction developed and boomed in the 20th century. Integration of science and invention in daily life encouraged a greater interest in literature that explores the relationship between technology, society, and the individual. So science fiction, which captures this concept called society, individual, and technology. It revolves around these three concepts. And which are the major themes of science fiction? And what science fiction deals in these writings? So that is the fundamental question that we all of us are aware of. We know that it is a prophetic warnings. Science fiction, it warns in a prophetic way, even a futuristic vision, and utopian aspirations in the world of utopia, the imaginary worlds, titanic disasters, the strange voyages, and satires, allegories, and parodies. So these are the tone that we understand in science fiction writing. Further, we have to define what actually science fiction is all about. How do we call it as a science fiction? How do we define it? Science fiction, it speculates about alternative ways of life made possible by technological change, and hence has sometimes been called a speculative fiction. Because today all of us are aware of speculative fictions are in number. People have been reading it and enjoying it, and they enjoy this kind of fictional capture. So why read science fiction? What's the reason? Why should we read science fiction? To enter into a fantastic world that is more exciting than mundane reality. Because all of us have this fascination to transcend to another world, and where we get a kind of the pleasure, enjoyment. So science fiction, in a way, it gives you that kind of it elevates you to this another world, and it gives you a kind of enjoyment in reading, the pleasures of reading, if I say so. So which are these types of science fiction? One is dystopian fiction. We have cyberpunk and apocalypse. These are the popular science fiction the parts. The very popular science fiction, I repeat, the dystopian fiction, which is an imaginary place, the where life is extremely difficult and a lot of unfair or immoral things do happen. And we have a cyberpunk, where this is a genre that deals with conflict among hackers and artificial intelligence. And the third important genre, that is apocalypse, a genre that is preoccupied with the final destruction of a world, or new era after the apocalypse has struck, for which we have a many texts that we have read. There are a number of writers are writing this kind of dystopian, cyberpunk, and apocalypse. So we have like Anne Martel. He's the one who popularized this term in this essay, that is, We Ate the Children Lost. It is a fiction, and that is called as a dystopian fiction too. And further, the research scope. What are the possibilities, challenges in research in science fiction? This posits a singular vision for the future among countless possibilities, built on a foundations of realism. It links the present with the future, invites us to consider the complex ways our choices and interactions contribute to generating the future. And further, science fiction is a result of constructive imagination. And gradually, another important component in my presentation is So, what are the objectives of science fiction? Number one, to expose and encourage students to think about their own futures and the effect of change upon their lives. Second, to expose students to a wide range of science fiction literature. And we all of us, in this conference, giving an outcome to popularize or to give a kind of a message to the entire reading community to encourage reading science fiction. And further, another objective, the third objective is it's a tool to deconstruct, understand and critique contemporary society. The next, to enhance critical awareness about science, to realize the interconnectedness between science, technology, culture, society and the environment, to encourage creative writing about the possible alternatives of future world. So these are the positives, these are the aspects, these are the objectives that popularize in the world of literary, in the world of research and research functions. And further, what are the research ethics in science fiction? Number one, it promotes in both humanities and social science instructive abilities to direct the whole of humanity towards wholesome living. To face challenges an uncertain future might pose through regulating human response, encoding the time-honed virtues and upholding humanitarian ends. And further, science fiction is still unconventional. I repeat, science fiction is still an unconventional creative response for the entire reading community, despite the whole reading community enjoys reading science fiction. It is yet to offer comprehensive moral and mental resilience. So we all of us have this question. So what are the challenges of this science fiction in research? Still we can understand that it is yet to offer comprehensive moral and mental resilience to navigate a global crisis or hard truth of day-to-day living. So, dear conference conveners and the moderators and all the organizers, I thank immensely for giving me this opportunity to share my views on science fiction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I welcome Dr. K.S. Purushothaman, Principal, Retired, Government Arts College, Krishnagiri, Tamil Nadu, for the session.
Hello, good evening, Professor Ravichandra and fellow panelists. A very warm welcome to all of you. It's indeed a pleasure to be associated with this particular panel because we are all research-oriented people who have struggled a lot, who have done a lot of hard work so that we could get a degree, either MPhil or a PhD in a particular subject. And when it comes to science fiction studies, it's not an easy choice for everyone. In fact, my own bitter experience is that while I had guided more than a dozen people for their PhD degree, only 2 of them came voluntarily looking for science fiction studies. In fact, these 2 young men from down south had waited for about 2 or 3 years, searching for a supervisor who would accept them as scholars in the study of science fiction. So when they came to me, both of us were thrilled because here are 2 people who have been struggling to pursue their passion for science fiction. This is the case with many, many others. Of course, now things are much better. There are a lot more supervisors, a lot more departments who have no objection to guide a student in science fiction studies. So therefore, what is the basic concern for all of us is that most people do not know much about science fiction, and even the little that they know, they understand that the resources are very scarce. Particularly when it comes to Indian science fiction, to put it very simply, even more difficult. Mainly because we have so many languages and we have science fiction written in all these languages, and the common language like English doesn't find much in Indian science fiction. There are very few. Of course, nowadays, more and more of these vernacular science fictions are being translated and published. Earlier, there used to be no such facility, no such encouragement. So therefore, when somebody wants to do research in science fiction, they really have to take a lot of risk. It is that risk that stops many of them either from accepting students or from students from taking up science fiction for their research. But then the fact is that it can be done even with scant resources by utilizing certain strong thematic studies. For example, one of the best dissertation that I have come across is by Suparna Banerjee, that was done in Louisiana State University, and got the degree in 2010. He calls the thesis Other Tomorrows, Post-Coloniality, Science Fiction and India. So here is something. You have post-coloniality, you have got science fiction and India. So the Indian cultural tradition, the Indian mythological situation, all this with post-coloniality gives you a very strong, what we can say, a force field of research potentiality. When the book was published, I think from the same thesis with other additions, etc., it was called Indian Science Fiction Patterns, History and Hybridity, published in 2020 by the University of Wales. Well, it's a wonderful book, no doubt. I meant to get hold of it. And when I see in the Amazon, what we see is that it is 5,920 rupees, today's cost. So maybe one of these days I'll get hold of that book too. So here is what we can do. You can take up utopian studies, dystopian studies, so many things. All these themes have very strong secondary resources all over, both Western or Indian. You will find plenty of them available, and use it for a particular Indian writer of science fiction. So that is how we can manage. We can encourage more and more people to come forward to do research in science fiction. In fact, there are many libraries, particularly as I usually mention, the erstwhile American Studies Research Center, Hyderabad. Now I think it's called Inter-University Center or something like that. It is still there. No more additions after 1990 or so. But the original books, they are all still there, books and journals and all that. So the basic facts, basic ideas and resources are still there. Some of the best secondary resources, science fiction criticism is available even there today. There is also the FLU library, English and Foreign Languages University, FLU. It is still available there. Some books will be there also. There is also the Skillet Library at the American College in Madurai. as a good collection. Of course, most of them may not be directly related to science fiction, but the thematic studies can be exploited very easily. So, therefore, I strongly believe that nothing is impossible to pursue a research in a particular topic selected in science fiction by using these available resources so that we can get a good number of scholars. And please remember that every thesis that is completed, a degree awarded, and may be published either digitally or in print media becomes a valuable secondary source. So, whatever you write becomes a secondary resource, and that is a good thing for you and for the younger scholars. So, these are the possibilities that I find that is opening up. So, therefore, I very strongly appeal to all the participants to spread the word. Please do communicate to your friends, your colleagues, and all these people and others that here is an opening, that here is a good field of study which is relevant to our culture, to the current technological situation, so that you will have a good research scope. And once that is done, we can always get into our website iasfs.in, and then you post your messages, tell us what you are interested in, and definitely we will be able to direct you to the resources, to people who can help you, to the guides too if they are willing to, if they want a guide. So this is what I would like to emphasize on this day in this particular panel, so that more and more research can be encouraged and more and more people, young scholars, can get benefited. Thank you. I hope this will be a useful session for all those participants, so that they will definitely see that this is not a no man's land, but here is the God's plenty for you to do your research and get your passions satisfied. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, I invite Dr. Ratnakar Belkar, Professor and Head, Retired, Department of English, Dhanvante National College, Nagpur, Maharashtra, for the session.
I intend to unfold myriad issues relating to SF research for the panel discussion 1 in International Science Fiction Conference 2023. Research is an endeavor to find solution to problem by scientific method of knowable universe. Reliability and validity are the important facets in scientific method. Method in the exploration of science fiction is the critical interpretative method which deals with data analysis and interpretation. Review of literature is to be carried out. On the basis of my experience, I find that many students, they don't write review of literature, and which doesn't provide the clue which areas are explored earlier. Students are to be encouraged to conduct research in science fiction beside the other literary genre as diaspora study, semiotic study, generic study. Board of Studies in English and Board of Studies in National Languages have to be instrumental to prescribe science fiction stories, science fiction articles, science fiction in media, in curricula, at school and at university level. As per the nature of science fiction is concerned, in the initial level, science fiction was criticized as dry, emotionally brash and commercial form of fiction appearing in pulp magazine, but today it is established genre of fiction. Readers from the different walks of life are turning to science fiction as the important sign of time. Science fiction, space with time. As far as the diagnostic feature of science fiction, are concerned, it relates to literature of change, dependence on science, predominance of ideas, extrapolation technique or projection, new symbols, metaphors and allegory, modern mythology. Science fiction is different from stream of consciousness novel, psychological novel, realistic novel and naturalistic novel in this context. As far as the operational mechanism of science fiction is concerned, the issue of science in fiction and the fiction in science is of stellar significance. In science fiction, there is a hypothesis which is based on the accepted science. On the basis of hypothesis, the world of fantasy is built. The world of fantasy is not escape from consensus reality, but it stresses the reality in more meaningful and serious way. So, in Freudian sense, fancy moves away from reality, but in science fiction, fantasy stresses reality in more meaningful and serious way. Science fiction writer projects or extrapolates consensus reality in the world of fantasy, which projects writer vision of reality. There are some terrains to explore in science fiction. Science fiction associates with myriad facets as sociological, political, economical, environmental, scientific, and as such, science fiction has multivices. It is polyphonic in Bakhtinian sense. Science fiction can be analyzed and interpreted from interdisciplinary standpoint and multidisciplinary standpoints. To be more specific, some specific areas to investigate in science fiction are, I read, SF, dystopia and colonial or imperial context, SF, utopia and post-colonial facet, SF and contemporary reality, SF and interdisciplinary approach, SF and multidisciplinary standpoint, SF and media, cyber SF, SF and AI, cultural encounter in science fiction, Indian science fiction in English, SF in Indian languages, and translated science fiction in various languages. Basic select bibliography for research students will be of immense helpful to prepare the fertile ground. I cite Ratnakar D. Belkar's book Science Fiction, Fantasy and Reality, published by Atlantic Publishers and Distributors, New Delhi in 2009. This is a book which will be of valuable help to science fiction scholar. Suparna Banerjee's book on Indian science fiction, James Gunn book New Encyclopedia of Science Fiction edited, Balaji Navale's book on American women science fiction writers, Patrick Parinder's book Science Fiction, A Critical Guide, which has sounded of immense help to me when I was pursuing the research on science fiction. I procured the book from British Council High Commission Library, which has proved to be a stepping stone to pursue research in science fiction. Nicholas Peter, Encyclopedia of Science Fiction edited, P.K. Krishnamurthy's book, Scholar's Guide to Modern American Science Fiction, Robert Scholes and Eric Rupkin's Science Fiction, History, Science and Vision. There are some journals, Science Fiction Studies, Exploration will provide the data sources. Science Fiction Research Association conferences, Indian Science Fiction Conference, which is held every 3 years, Indian Association of Science Fiction Studies conferences will render the seminal help to open new frontiers in SF. Center for Science Fiction Studies, Kansas University, Center for Science Fiction Studies, University of Liverpool, and Usman University Center of International Studies and Culture will be of stellar significance to pursue research in SF. In nutshell, review of literature, inclusion of SF at curricular level at school and university level, references in the form of books, encyclopedia, journals, films, microfilms, clues in conferences prepare the fertile ground for research in SF and to open new visa in the realm of science fiction studies. Thanks. Wish fine time to all.
Thank you, sir. Now, I invite Dr. Rukmini Krishna, Associate Professor, Department of English, School of Social Sciences and Languages, VIT Vellore, to take over the session.
A very good morning to one and all. At the outset, let me thank the organizers of this conference for giving me an opportunity to be one of the panelists in this panel discussion. As the panel discussion is on the issues related to research, I would like to focus on issues pertaining to understand collective consciousness and binary opposition in literature in general and Indian science fiction in particular, and be a signpost to indicate that there lies a lot of scope for further research in this area. While there is a scope, there are certain issues, challenges, and implications too. Over the course of the past few centuries, the concept of collective consciousness and binary opposition have been evoking eminent thinkers in a wide variety of disciplines, ranging from literature, philosophy, psychology to biology and physics. However, with the exception of a few recent studies, there has been practically no research directly assessing the reality of collective consciousness and binary opposition and the imminent danger and risk the society will have to witness and bear if not reckoned to or addressed to is immense. More so, hardly any research has been done to explore the connectivity between binary opposition and collective consciousness. For if understood in the right sense, there wouldn't be arising any havoc, conflicts, and confrontations in the society till date and ever. Nevertheless, there lies a ray of hope if identified the root cause of the origin of binary opposition and the effect it plays in the exploration of collective consciousness. There is a misconception that these twin concepts of binary opposition and collective consciousness is of the Western origin and has been spread to the East in the very recent times. Contrarily, the aforementioned concepts are still in their infancy in the West, and in the East, these very concepts had been explored and known since the inception of the universe itself. In the West, collective consciousness has been synonymous with collective emotions and till date reached a peak where they misconstrue it to be something that is evidential. To exemplify, it is believed that quantum computing will transform the world and create a 21st century space race. People describe quantum as a new space race, and it is vital to our economy and equally important to our national security, says Joe Biden. While traditional computers rely on binary bits, switches either on or off, denoted as ones and zeros, to process information, the qubits that underpin quantum computing are tiny subatomic particles that can exist in some percentage of both states simultaneously, rather like a coin spinning in the mid-air. This leap from dual to multivariate processing exponentially boosts the computing power. Complex problems that currently take the most powerful supercomputer several years could potentially be solved in seconds. Future quantum computers could open hitherto unfathomable frontiers in mathematics and science, helping to solve existential challenges like climate change and food security. Quantum's problem solving capacity and will soon render all existing cryptography obsolete, jeopardizing communicating, financial transactions, and even military defenses. We understand that the efforts put by the scientists and physicists have culminated in a ray of hope to explore the collective consciousness, but right now it has its own complexities. For today, technology, AI, is an indication to a new kind of industrial revolution that is leading to a tryst with humanity. AI and society, AI and humanity has become much debatable issues in various international scientific, industrial, and academic uh, platforms. The extension of all aforementioned advancements can be witnessed in the science fiction writings and movies such as The Ghost in the Shell, Ex Machina, Matrix, etc., stating that consciousness can be downloaded, etc. Is consciousness something that can be downloaded or uploaded? Presently, this situation necessitates to quickly shift the focus from the knowledge and experience of the outer world to the inner world, where the problem to the issues concerning to binary opposition can be found in the right understanding of collective consciousness. Well, these answers to the prevailing problems issues can be found in the East, especially in Indian literature. For consciousness is not something synonymous to awareness, but it is something beyond that. It is the very existence of life itself, which is regarded as a supreme secret behind all existences. Their expression through literature is an expression of the inner self. India, that is the land of rishis, has not only known it but experienced it. One who experiences this feels ecstatic. For him, everything looks beautiful, which is termed as Satchidanand. That is existence consciousness, which has been transferred to us through Mahavakyas of the Upanishads. Ignorance of this supreme knowledge, various schools of thought have been emerging since the Aeonic times till date, instilling in the individuals and collective certain complexities such as one school of thought is different from the other and that theirs is the supreme among all the other. This ignorance arises due to the inability of thinking beyond the mind. The Westerners have been delving into the in depth of the mind avenues, ending with the mind as the ultimate. Thus, their comprehension of consciousness at the mental plane is mundane in its nature, which gives much scope to binaries. The consciousness that India talks about sans binaries, where it is one without the second. Ekam eva advitiyam, that is Sanatana, which meant eternal in its nature. In that knowledge, tradition staunchly believes in the one without the second. The Vedas, the Upanishads stand as an evidence to this. One who experiences the one, for him, the objectifier and the objectified both are one, where he is the universe and universe is him. As the Upanishad says, saying goes, Tattvam Asi, Prajnanam Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Atma Brahma. This tradition has been transferred to us through the Guru Sishya Parampara, where the teacher and the pupil travel together in the exploration of the eternal self. The sans binaries such as I and you, individual and the collective, etc. Consciousness in the right sense is understood as eternal, and infinite in nature. In the East, every life in this world is a part of infinite. Infinite minus infinity remains undefined, and infinity plus infinity remains infinite. पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. That is, how much ever you try to subtract or add to the infinite, the infinite remains same. Research done in literature during the ancient times in India culminates in stating the above, that how much ever one tries to subtract from and add to infinite, it remains the same. Though mathematics in this way, in the West proves this, but still they haven't reached in staunchly believing in the knowledge inside out. Western science is still struggling with knowledge outside in, and thus the degeneracy in society, prone to conflicts such as caught in binaries that leads to more and more multiple binaries. To quote the Gita, in the matter of creation, the material energy is responsible for cause and effect. In the matter of experiencing happiness and distress, the individual soul is declared responsible. The causes for binary opposition in literature has already been researched during ancient times. The binary opposition that started in the West from the structuralism culminates in post-humanism, questioning humanity and multiplying binaries due to the advancement of technology. And one such is the artificial intelligence. When science that believes in the knowledge outside in is prevailing, then the fiction based on such science should build a dystopian society alone and never a utopian one. Hence, future researchers inclined to pursue research in collective consciousness and binary opposition in literature has to have the knowledge of both the Western and the Eastern. Otherwise, the research pursued by them would end up in generating more and more binaries, culminating in calamities. Future research can be a blend of science and spirituality that could provide answers to the present prevailing complexities in this universe, where there arises no dichotomies in the universe. Too much narrowing of the subjects is leading to multiple binaries. It's only in the interconnectivity that holisticity lies. Education is not competition. True education is the education of the inner self. Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam, says the Gita, which means knowledge of the inner self is the highest of all knowledge. Sa Vidyaya Vimuktaye, says the Upanishads. It is thus education that liberates. Unfortunately, the research papers in literature that talks about binary opposition, there are many papers on the self and the world, the self and the society. The collective consciousness says that there is only one universal self, of which we are a part of it. It's just like if you take a drop from the ocean. The ocean, the drop has all the characteristics of the ocean. But unfortunately today, only the outer knowledge of the outer self is prioritized. So that's the termination of binaries, which are discussed and researched in the name of nationalism, in the name of um, you know, even what in the name of color, caste, creed, race, language. And today, the extension of these kind of binaries in the name of nationalism has ended up in techno-nationalism, where each country thinks of dominating the other by enriching themselves in technology, dominate the rest of the world, and make them succumb to them. As far as the collective consciousness is not rightly understood, binary oppositions will be prevailing. Hence, all research that ends in binaries should lead towards a holistic perspective. But unfortunately, today's research till date, which is done from a Western perspective, in the modern universities, is based on the Western perspective, and hence it is culminating only in binaries. All research should end up in relating one discipline to the other, and ultimately culminate in holisticity. But unfortunately today, we find many narrowing down of subjects where the researcher assumes that the specific subject is a separate entity. That's where they flounder. That's where they failed. And hence the superiority, the complexities journey. So it is high time for us, the Department of English Language and Literature and the humanities per se, to leave the researchers thought-provoking and think of what can be done towards holisticity, rather than ending up with certain subjects assuming that to be a separate entity. No subject is a separate entity. Everything is interlinked. We are all interlinked. We are never separate. That's what leads to the right understanding of collective consciousness. Thank you. Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Greetings, everybody. This brings us to the close of the two sessions on the issues confronting research in science fiction. These sessions were more a response of inventory of what has transpired in Indian academia so far. The scholars represent literary studies or sciences in their own universities, and their presentations as such are fairly significant. The conference is grateful to them for bringing to the table their invaluable experience. Professor Shreya Bhattacharya and Dr. Amitabha Bhattacharya have in their joint paper explored the status of science fiction in Indian languages. Dr. Amitabha has brought to us his creative enterprise of popularizing scientific concepts. Professor Rukmini Krishna has attempted to explore the relationship between philosophy and science fiction. Dr. Kasturi Sinha-Roy, in her erudite presentation, discusses, among other things, how gender interpolates science fiction studies. Dr. Nataraju confronted some unresolved issues that the supervisor and the research scholars face in their pursuit of science fiction today. Dr. Ratnakar Bhelkar brings to the audience his rich experience as a serious researcher and a teacher of science fiction in Indian academia. Dr. Anbarasi and Dr. Sonali Kadam have raised some misgivings and offered some noteworthy observations on the prevalent situation of research in science fiction. I wish to thank them all on behalf of the executives and the organizing committee of the conference for their responses. These two sessions could take place only because of the young scholar, Hemalata, who along with the team coordinated faultlessly with all the panelists and I. The technical team headed by Dr. Dayanand, who tirelessly worked in camera to produce these presentations, made things easy and as professional as was possible under the circumstance. I do hope that these sessions kickstart similar cogitations in our universities and snowballs into a borderless study involving the sciences and the humanities jointly. Goodbye, everybody.
Now, I call upon Miss Sona, final year English student, to deliver the vote of thanks for today's session.
We have reached the end of this panel discussion. I thank the moderator, C.P. Ravichandra, for his impeccable contribution. My gratitude to all the panelists who added their valuable thoughts to the panel discussion titled Issues Related to Science Fiction Research. I also thank Dr. Srinarahari sir, members of the organizing committee, Ms. Hemalata, convener, Mr. Dayanand, technical head, for their constant efforts. Next up, we have paper presentations, self-authored science fiction storytelling session.